Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia. How are you guys? I hope you guys are doing well. I'm very honored today with my guest on this podcast. And like we promised on Mind Podcast, we get you a variety of voices on all the topics that have covered, all the topics that are to be covered in the past week, and many other topics as well. So with me, I have Manan Bhatt, who is a veteran of the Indian Navy. He's a decorated officer. He's an author. He's written a fantastic book about Pulwama. He's a columnist. But like I said, the most important bit I gave first. So first of all, thank you, Mr. Bhatt, for joining us, and thank you for your service and what you've done for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jahin. It's a pleasure, Adit bhai, to be here,
Yes,
to be on
absolutely.
this podcast.
Absolutely. So if if you guys are listeners find Manan and me going into Adit bhai Manan bhai mode, that is because we are both Gujaratis. So I had to put it out there. In any case, people know that about that. So thank you for joining. It's a tough week. The reason I say this obviously is we tragically lost General Bipin Rawat, who's the commander of the CDS, a new post that was just created by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. It exists in United States, where they call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In India, that's the CDS that was started, and Bipin Rawat, the late General Bipin Rawat, was the first one to be there. And we are here actually. We were planning on discussing. Mananbhai's book. But really, when we were talking offline yesterday, we were like, we should start our discussion just talking a little bit about what this meant, how big of a loss this is. I mean, you all know I'm being kind of redundant when I say that how big of a loss this is, but I just want a veteran's perspective on what this means. And I don't want to get into all sorts of crazy theories doing round on Twitter. We are all very sad about this loss, but we won't entertain, strange conspiracy theories that people might be saying, because that doesn't do good for the legacy of General Rawat or for the or his record. We want to focus on what he represented and what is the path forward. So I would like to throw the gauntlet to you, if you can, just for our listeners, and then we'll get into a discussion of his book. I promise you, we're not going to not talk about it. Uh, what does the loss of General Rawat mean? And for us to lose someone so senior in this position, and the way, and along with him, 10 very, very, I mean, some very good officers, engineers, crew members that we lost, and his wife, Madhulika Rawat, as well, who tragically passed away.
It was a big loss for the defense fraternity, not only for us veterans, but also for the services. Because General Rawat, as we all know, that the CDS is newly created position in the Indian Armed Forces, and he was heading the three forces since last 1 year, and the coordination that he was able to manage with the government of India and the three armed forces was something outstanding. We earlier, what the armed forces have to, whenever they have to purchase something, whenever they have some demands, whenever they were looking for modernization, they have to go through IAS officer or sort of things. But for since the moment the Department of Military Affairs was created, DMA, which was headed by the CDS, we had he had a clear vision for the armed forces, and he was this is something new that Indian armed forces had seen, because there always have some issues with the politically elected governments and the armed forces. They sometimes it used to happen that they were the thinking level of the government and the armed forces were sometimes not on the same platform. But as the uh, uh, General Rawat had a very cordial, he used to have a very cordial relation with the present government and with Prime Minister Modi. So it was like the communications were so much clear that the armed forces had seen a never before upsurge in their, the government meeting their demands, and the modernization, the indigenization, which was pushed by the government. Everything was getting in place, and the biggest reform that since independence is, if I would say, the theaterization of the armed forces, theater commands, creating the theater commands and fighting the wars together. It was being done under General Rawat's direct supervision. So I think that we have felt a very huge jolt. It's a big
mm,
loss for us when we have lost General Rawat, sir.
mm,
Along
mm.
with along with him, the soldiers that who have lost their lives, the officers that those who have lost their lives. This is a tremendous loss for the armed forces, and it's a personal blow. It's a psychological blow for us also, because you don't want to lose your colleagues in an accident or something, because it's a sad thing that has happened to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and I think ultimately that's the sad part of what usually happens is that when you have such a tragedy, it almost that becomes the discussion and not the glorious career of the person who was there, right? And we must also not forget the other officers who were, with this General Rawat's thing, because I think because we fall into this trap, right? Like we are talking about the air crash more than the career or what he established himself. He was, of course, the chief of the Indian Armed Forces. Then he was the last chairman of the Chief of Staff Committee, as people might know that the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army almost rotated the sort of the chairmanship. Now you have one post, which is the Chief of Defense, which overlooks everything, and especially when it comes to procurement. And we had special issues with procurement in the previous regime, before Mr. Modi took over, where a lot of questions. Shekhar Gupta had this wonderful term for the then defense minister. He said he was like Bapu Nadkarni, who would never pick up any wickets but bowl 25 maidens. So he would just not take any decisions and just keep bowling maidens. But you also needed the bowler to take wickets and make purchases. So unfortunately, that is, jokes apart, that is what it was. And General Rawat did manage to declog or declutter many of these issues.
He had a tremendous influence on the government as well as in the armed forces, being the previous army chief. and
Hmm.
and uh, we have seen during COVID, there were a lot of emergency procurements which were done by the armed forces,
Hmm.
and every emergency procurement approval was given by the government.
Mhm.
The biggest, I think, uh, the biggest achievement that I consider that General Rawat was able to achieve was uh, he was able to provide the troops who were facing the Chinese at the LSE with a very good quality accommodation that is not usually the norm, that is not usually seen in the armed forces. The accommodation that we have at the LSE and in the Ladakh nowadays is an envy for the enemy also.
Right.
And this is I don't think that our troops ever had such kind of air conditioning and such kind of accommodation that even in temperatures that goes as low as minus 30 degrees
Mhm.
Celsius. The troops, the temperature in the barracks that we have now is around plus 20 degrees. So it's something which is tremendous, and we have 50,000 troops stationed along LSE, and due to the present conflict situation with China, all the troops, they are having good logistics backup. They are having a good accommodation, and the roads, the border roads, border infrastructure has grown multifold in the present regime. So quite a lot of things have happened. Those were the positives that I take during General Rawat's regime. And
And,
as you say,
Mhm. No, and one
yeah,
thing just I wanted to add as we expand is also the names of the others. Apart from Mr. Bipin Rawat and General Bipin Rawat and Madhulika Rawat was Brigadier L.S. Lidder, Colonel H. Singh, Wing Commander P.S. Chauhan, Squadron Leader K. Singh, J.W. Mr. Das, Pradeep A. Havaldar Satpal, Naik Gursevak Singh, Jitendra, Lance Naik Vivek, and Lance Naik as Teja. Now, I'm of course reading this from a list. I did not want to, so I was following the list exactly. I do not know the last name, so I was, of every officer, so I do not want to, mispronounce them. But keeping all of them in our, thoughts and prayers, and their families typically, who were not expecting to wake up a week ago, assuming that what would be a short helicopter ride from one place to the other would be so fatal.
With our top leader, with
With our
with General
family.
Rawat, we have
Yeah,
lost big some. It's a big loss that we have lost already. We have 13
yeah.
people.
So
Brigadier leader was about to become a major general. He
yeah,
was a
yeah.
he was a super officer. He had the uh, expertise in counterterrorism,
Hmm,
anti-insurgency operations.
hmm,
Then you have two Air Force guys who were on duty.
hmm.
They were traveling with the aircraft. Then there is uh, Group Captain Varun Singh, who is fighting with fighting his battle in the hospital. He was awarded Shaurya Chakra just a year back
Yeah.
for saving LCA Tejas. He was the
Hmm,
liaison officer for the CDS. Then um, Brigadier Leader was the defense attaché of the CDS. His staff officer. He also his
yeah,
wife,
yeah.
Mrs. Rawat, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat. She was heading the Defense Wife Welfare Association, and she was taking care of uh, welfare activities of Jawans and officers' wives. So
Mhm.
each one of them, it's
Yeah,
a very big loss. It's a
it's
big
a
loss.
very big loss, and also the way it happened, right? You're like, oh my god, did India lost some of its best and its bravest, and the way it all happened, it's that I mean, that is as tragic as the event itself, right? The What happened. But and I want to come back to General Rawat in a few moments. Like, we began with General Rawat and we'll end with General Rawat and the defense thing. But this gives me sort of a segue to talk a little bit about your book, Manan Bhai, about when you talked about Javans, um, being martyred. And I want to do. I have it on my Kindle, so I'm gonna, just show it to our audience. Um, the first thing that struck me was, and here is where we know that a navy a veteran wrote this book, is you start with a very personal stories of the officers, right? When we find books written by defense journalists or journalists, they do write about the officers, they do write about the background, but they do like an equal job, right? They also will talk about, okay, XYZ, the person who was killed by the terrorist was this guy in, Kashmir, this is what happened. And then you also find some sort of a background story of the officers, which is again a very journalistic approach. But what is missed is the human aspect of the officers themselves, about there. So I found it very fascinating that you talk about Tilak Raj as Tilak Raj Shanu, as he was called, because he would sing in his thing. And I was smiling, because, and smiling in a very eerie sort of way, because I know what is going to happen, in the subsequent chapters. This is not surprise, so it breaks your heart even more, because you are emotionally invested. So is that a conscious, because as a veteran, is that a conscious approach you do end up taking, that the other authors don't, because they almost forget that, there is a huge human life that is associated. They also just dance on Diwali, throw colors on each other at Holi, just like we would as well.
While writing or narrating a story, I carry this huge burden, a huge responsibility of telling about, speaking about my fellow Jawans, my the officers or the Jawans who sometimes are part of a tragedy, sometimes are part of a successful operation.
Hmm.
But it's a huge responsibility. One can call it a burden, or it's a thing that one has to say. I mean, I have researched when I completed my research about the book, and it's like some stories stay with you, some tales, some heroism. Sometimes this you have very ordinary people coming from very ordinary background, but they do some heroics. they leave their mark on the sense of time.
mm, mm.
What happens is that while looking at the bigger picture, we are not able to mention them. While looking at the while mentioning the bigger picture, we are not able to actually talk about them. This
Right.
happens when you write a big story. But
Absolutely.
even after, even when I complete my stories, I take a look at them, and I, because I have been in the place. If I talk about the Pulwama, the Jawans who are traveling through that bus. I've been a troop. I have already I've traveled throughout my
Mm,
life in troop carriers.
mm,
I
mm,
know that how it is, how it is like to be part of a bigger troop of troops.
mm,
So
mm,
I've known this all along, and certain feelings are always there when you
yeah.
it's like
Mm.
I was part of the convoy. It's like I was sitting besides while writing about Wing Commander Abhinandan also.
Yeah.
I feel like I was sitting beside just behind his aircraft.
Absolutely. So that's why I showed the picture. For our viewers must have seen the picture I just shared. That is about his book, and it's a fascinating read, right? And when of course, Mr. Captain Abhinandan is on the cover of the book. But going into, and let's get into the meat of the book itself. What is fascinating, and first of all, I'll quote with what something you start with: they shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. It's for the fall, from a passage from For the Fallen, and I absolutely love that passage, that you start your book with that, because yes, these stories shall not grow old, and there are thousands, millions of stories, millions of sub stories, right? People think that sacrifice is just sacrificing on the border. It's the sacrifice that the family takes. It's a sacrifice that the neighbors do. Sometimes as the cliche goes, it takes a village, to raise. So every officer has their own village, their city, their mohalla, everything associated with this. And these stories shall not grow old. Yeah.
The
So
man, yeah, yeah. I can. It's a very emotional thing for me
hmm,
while writing about the martyrs, the
hmm,
fallen soldiers.
absolutely.
They they the devastation that their families have felt, the
Hmm,
nobody is except them, except the families of the fallen Jawans, fallen
hmm,
soldiers. Nobody else, not even me. We are not able to understand the pain, the travails of the lives that they will
hmm,
face.
hmm, hmm,
And at least we can do on our part is to understand it, try to portray it in a way that the readers would be able to understand it.
hmm,
Let not never wanted my book to be a hunky-dory story of the only the Balakot airstrike.
hmm,
Until unless the reader reads about Pulwama, I don't want to even write about Balakot. For
hmm,
first and foremost thing for me was the Pulwama, and then only the resolve or the our the Balakot airstrike will happen
hmm,
only when you have Pulwama. The travels of Pulwama, the 40 fallen men of Pulwama should always be remembered, and it should be a collective resolve for the entire country that we will never let any more Pulwama happen, or any more 26/11 happen, anything.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
Whatever has happened, any terror attack,
hmm,
some kind of laxity
hmm.
from our part uh,
Yeah,
might
right.
have caused that.
Absolutely. So let me get into the specifics of the book. We everyone do, and I mean, unless you want to talk a little bit about it, I think everyone knows what happened with the Adil Ahmed Dar, and the story beyond this. I want to get into a little bit after the Pulwama attack. I mean, feel free to talk a little bit about the attack if you want to, but I want to know about that meeting, right? You talk about the CCS meeting, right? And we are talking about General Rawat, and who was serving at that time, and must, if not exactly present at the meeting, he would be absolutely in the know and would be at the forefront of planning. So it's almost eerie that we planned to talk about this book, and then this would happen last week. So it's almost like paying tribute to one of his most stellar responses as the um there was a mission planning that took place with the IAF, with with the joint military operations and so forth. So if you can delve a little bit about what you write on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened after.
In India, books about Air Force rarely talk about the mission planning aspect of the operations.
Yes.
And first and foremost, you don't want to divulge everything, or you don't want to this just tell people that I mean, tell the enemies, because the book can also carry a message for the enemies. You don't want that them to learn.
Yeah.
So, but it has to be written. I sent
Yeah.
my book, my initial draft of the book, to a very senior officer, a very superior officer rather, who was part of the operations, who was heading the operations, and
Right.
he
Right.
said,
Right.
Manan, okay, it's your work. Then I realized that I understood. I've served with so many superior officers that I understood that when a officer says something in such manner that he was not happy with the work, and I knew that I had little access to the mission planning aspect of
Hmm.
the actual operation. So I had to wait for some months to make so that I could understand a few things. I could talk to some people who were there,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
somehow things started to roll out. And this is how the mission planning actually I was able to work on the mission planning aspect of the entire operation.
Hmm.
It's a now it is an open secret. We all know that how it uh, my my take on mission planning is how it is usually, it
Hmm.
has to be done. It is usually done, be it the Indian Air Force, or any other air force in the world.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not the actual detail. It may not be, because it should not carry the actual detail unless the operation is unclassified by the government.
Hmm.
So I did try to give my best, so that somebody who is an aviation or enthusiast, or somebody who has a very keen interest in defense, will
Hmm.
be able to understand how does mission planning cell works, how does it functions. I worked in the mission planning cell of Indian Navy
Hmm.
for some time, so I know that how things go. Yes, it's a bit technical for somebody who is looking, just wanted to read a story based book. It's a bit technical, but it has to be part of it. It is an indefinite part of my book, the
Hmm.
mission
Hmm.
planning.
Absolutely. No, it has to, right? Like, you ultimately, that's a call you have to take, that you are writing as an officer, but you are also writing as an author, and it's a very it's a page turner, right? And I don't want to give away the details also for our listeners and viewers who have not read the book, right? But I also want to, since I have you here, I want to pick your brains a little bit on it, right? That you talk about, you talk about it a very operational level also. There are two kinds of planning that happen, right? One is at the very senior level that you discuss, not where the powers to be and the officers who are the decision makers are. And then there is a discussion that takes place with those who are in the organizing group, right? So there almost needs to be sort of a syncretic sort of thought when it comes to this, because passions were, as you mentioned in your book, the passions were, at their highest after what had happened to Pulwama. I mean, I remember. And then we talk about the Balakot strikes that happened post, which changed the whole sort of paradigm of the whole thing. And then you're talking about, between the last barrier, which is one of your chapters where you talk about, the LOC crossing and stuff. In between, you had the whole execution, you had the strike package, you had sort of a almost a new operational level where you had to deal with drones, you also had to deal with the nighttime. So how do you think all that was done so efficiently? And also, in such a quick manner, right? It almost seems like it was the passions were sort of redirected to one goal, that we have to get this done, come what may.
See, the armed forces, Indian armed forces are very professional forces. So, at the operational level, when orders come, when you are doing a war exercise, for say,
Hmm, hmm,
there is a war exercise which was held just before the airstrikes.
hmm,
For the exercises, the officers do plan things very intricately, and for the operation work of the
hmm,
particular exercise.
hmm,
These things do happen very regularly. We practice a lot. We have the Air Force have practiced surgical air strikes, or kind of operations quite a lot of time. But to execute it in a real time, or to execute such kind of operation behind enemy lines, it's a tough thing. But when what I think is, at the back of the mind, back of your mind, the officers have the fallout of Pulwama, the terror of Pulwama was always there in their back of the mind. So
hmm,
they everybody, every single Indian, including the officers in the operations room,
hmm,
wanted to make sure that terror should be eliminated.
hmm, hmm,
When you have a clear goal, clear sight in place, the execution will always be perfect, the planning will always be perfect, and things move very fast.
hmm,
And nothing can surpass a clear goal.
hmm.
That is for sure.
Fascinating, fascinating. So no, you're right, absolutely. So if I were to take this a little further, right, like let's look at it, from the perspective of, let's look at it from a strategic perspective, that you're going at a multi-pronged approach, right? Like you indicate, again, I don't want to give away everything that he says. He talks about the HR, and what that HR means. What Read the book to find out, and what it means. um, you almost need a syncretic sort of things, and before the CDS happened and so forth, there were a little bit of qualms within the establishment about, if the army, if the air force, is there going to be coordination. In Kargil, we have seen previously where in the initial days there weren't the as syncretic as we thought, and I'm not blaming anyone or something, it's just we weren't wired to approach that way. I think that is, India learned, like all countries, like all democracies, we learned from our experiences that this is the syncretic approach we should take. Yet we saw a very syncretic approach that had happened that day, right? So that day or that week or that month. So how would you classify that? And and can you describe the response in as your own analysis, like what happened, and what how would you classify the response?
I must say that since the moment Mr. Ajit Doval has been at the helm of affairs as NSA,
Hmm,
inter services synchronization is really very commendable,
hmm,
and the role of General Rawat has also been very very positive. Has been a very blessed thing for us.
hmm, hmm,
The synchronization between ISRO, the
hmm,
NTRO, and the three services. That particularly the RO had a RNAW. They had
hmm,
a ground intelligence. The best part is that government, the three services, and the entire technical intelligence and ground intelligence, everybody, they were on
hmm,
the same page. It
hmm,
happens very rarely. uh, as we all know that earlier, say it in say maybe Kargil or before that, we had
hmm,
certain issues with this. But government people who are working with the government, if
hmm,
particularly the departments who are working directly with the government and
hmm,
the armed forces,
hmm,
it's a good thing that we are able to achieve this. And I feel that if I was part of the service,
hmm,
I would have felt very very good, because I have served with the DRDO. I have served in Delhi in the
hmm,
integrated headquarters also. I've never seen the government and the armed forces on the same page. It's a great thing. It's a great feeling for each one of us, each one, each every Indian, I think.
Exactly. So, I mean, so you are talking about, and basically the DRDO and the sort of, I hate to use this term in the context of India, but in US especially, you have the whole military industrial complex and the whole discussion about that. I don't think we have that in India. Essentially, it's still a very government dominated industry, and so the reforms that were to take place have to take place from within rather than the outside reforms, because in US, when you talk about the military reform, it's outside in rather than inside out approach, right? So in India, you are looking at a very different things. But what is fascinating that I found, and in the specifics of the mission that you talk about, are not just the coordination of this. You also had the whole concept of the air to air refueling. So how, if you can talk a little bit about that. I don't want to give everything away, but it's fascinating. These are things that we hear about uh, on TV shows, officers talk about, but very recently are we hearing something that is so, so recent in our public memory. And then we'll talk from there. We'll go to the Pakistan air raid alert and what Captain Abhinandan faced and so forth.
The air-to-air fueling has also never been discussed in public.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we actually, at, in Navy we do fueling at sea. That is
Mm,
no that is called as replenishment at sea, a
mm,
RAS.
mm,
And
mm,
I've always been fascinated by the RAS aspect. We also, one can travel to and fro ship through the RAS rope. So it has always fascinated me, and the air-to-air fueling is rather more risky,
mm,
is rather more difficult
mm,
to actually execute, and when it is done at night, it is the
mm,
most challenging aspect.
mm,
But as we all know that we during the Balakot, before the Balakot airstrike, the our jets, they refueled in air, and it was a good experience because the weather was also not good. And
mm.
I think I should leave it to the
Yeah,
reader
leave
to.
it. Yeah, I just I just wanted you to talk a little bit about it. I don't want to give it completely away, because I think you know it's not been written about it, right? But then we move on to what happened in there. Where the commanders were killed, and it was fascinating uh, what we what the Indian Armed Forces did. And I mean, there have been web series and things made about which attempt to talk about that. But I think your book goes into a lot more detail. That they've barely scratched the surface, because again, you are giving a very inside out perspective from the inside. You are aware of how these happened. So not only did the Indian army not suffer many casualties, it was almost unthinkable. Post Uri, we did have the surgical strikes, but they thought that post Balakot, we would not cross the LOC, but it did happen. And then the Air Force thing happened, and of course, unfortunately, we had the situation with Captain Abhinandan. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, and then lead into the whole Captain Abhinandan sort of story.
See, Pakistan had never thought that India would intrude this deep and attack a camp it was in FATA, that
Hmm,
is
hmm,
federally administration
hmm,
administrator areas,
hmm,
and it was India did something which was unthinkable for the enemy.
hmm,
And the Balakot camp has been a very notorious camp, and
hmm,
it has a very long history of terrorism,
hmm,
fanatism, and terrorism. So it felt great uh, that India attacked them, that a
hmm,
particular camp which was so deep inside. And
hmm,
there were quite a few intricacies. People say that they should have attacked the JM headquarters, but not many in India know that the JM headquarters the has a old age home
hmm,
alongside it. It has a madrasa which teaches small children alongside it. So
hmm,
basically, the big people of the big heads, say Masood Azhar, or everybody, the LAT had also. who was there in Mudrike. They all are protecting themselves by hiding behind the old people and children.
Hmm,
So
hmm,
India has a very clear concept of, and PM was very clear in his message when he said that ठीक है आपको आपको जो ठीक लगता है करो, but no innocent should die.
hmm, hmm.
So this is how the target was chosen, and we are very clear with our humanitarian. The approach is all has our armed forces approach has always been very humanitarian, and it's a great thing that we not a single civilian was killed. We
Yeah,
everybody who died there were terrorists,
and
and
ultimately we have to choose what we want to be as a country, right? Do we want to be a country of barbarians, or a country that celebrates democracy? We chose the democratic approach, rightfully so, because we are a democracy, so we did, but we are not going to
but we
take
are not.
decisions that were previously detrimental to our interests. So in this interests, we made the determination that we have to cross the LOC to attack, and we did. And guys, if you are already intrigued by the book, let me tell you, this is only halfway through the book. We have not even completed the other half, which is I find even more fascinating, because this is known, the other half is not known. When the story can where we, and he very aptly titles the story continues, because then we get into the Orbat. We are talking about the Bisons, we're talking about and we're not even talking about the MiG-21 yet. I think how the IACC has jumped, into actions, and then how the interrogations took place. Correct. So before we even get into the diplomatic pressure, right? If you can just give a brief overview of what happened before, and then which led to the whole Captain Abhinandan sort of situation, and then India not only came at it from the defense side, it also came at it from the diplomatic side. We'll talk a little bit about that.
India knew that Pakistan would retaliate.
Hmm,
We had attacked their biggest assets, that is
hmm,
the terrorists.
hmm,
We were awaiting their retribution. It didn't happen the very next day,
hmm,
but the day after, there was a big buildup of PF fighters
hmm,
at the LOC, and
hmm,
as we all know that India has a very technically India is very advanced in comparison to Pakistan.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
It's like if India wants to fire a missile, what
hmm.
what a pilot will do is he'll just fire the missile and share a link, like we share a link in WhatsApp. It's so fascinating. It is so fascinating. You just share a link with the IACCS or the technician at sitting there in Netra.
Okay, this is not known to a lot of people. So I just want to repeat. So he just said, if India wants to fire a missile, we just fire a missile, and they're like, "Aaj phod diya." That's pretty much.
Yes.
That's how simple it. Of course, it's not as as simple and as vicious. There are chain of commands, and of course, but this is fascinating. It's that information now is very easy to disseminate, and it can go to the right people at the same time, rather than going through a chain of command that used to happen in the earlier days in India.
Things have changed, and technically we are very advanced. So
Hmm,
when Pakistan build-up started,
hmm,
uh,
hmm,
the radars at the LSC, LOC, and the radar in the air, the Netra, it was already transmitting the warnings to the IACCS, which is situated deep inside India, which is at the center of almost at the center of the country.
hmm, hmm,
So they immediately took command and ordered the planes who were on already duty to
hmm,
defend defend our assets
hmm,
from enemy attack.
hmm,
And one can't believe that such a huge Pakistani contingent of almost 24, 25 fighter jets was defend, and there was only in the Srinagar region there were only two MiG-21 Bisons who were able to show up the enemy contingent. It was such a great feat. It was a brave thing that Abhinandan did. Uh, his tactical brilliance is out of the world. The way he took off from behind the Pir Panjal range,
hmm,
uh,
hmm, hmm,
before the enemies get to know that an Indian aircraft in the vicinity, he was almost onto them, and he used his superior speed, his jackrabbit acceleration to his uh, to his benefit, that enemy had nowhere to go,
Yeah.
and this is how he was able to
And Pir
uh,
Panjal and Pir Panjal Rail is a very treacherous sort of range in terms of aeronautics operations. If I in Air Force operation, there is the whole tunnel that is now built. In that reduces the thing. But when you talk about strategically, I think. What is interesting here is, again, like what I said with General Rawat, right? Because of something that happened so significantly after, in which case he had to eject, from his aircraft and so forth. People forget what happened before, which is more critical, where the Pakistan jets were, dispatched. One of them was taken care of, and they were chasing the other one, if I'm not mistaken, and that's when this happened. So I want to talk about, and you talk about this in your book, right? So I want you to talk about that first, and then then what happened, then what we know. Yeah.
see, Wing Commander Abhinandan was at it. He was so much aggressive that, uh, and he went so near to the F-16 that F-16 had a MRAM missile, which has a very good BBR. MRAM is a very good beyond visual range missile. But the R-73 that Abhinandan had is a fantastic within visual range missile. And what happened was the F-16 that Abhinandan attacked. Uh, that guy was unfortunate because Abhinandan was so near to him. He was able to actually target him and hit him with his missile, and the before he could engage or do something, Abhinandan was able to, yeah, just hit just engage his jet and target the enemy aircraft. But enemy contingent was so big that uh, just after finishing the attack and just after hitting the F-16, Abhinandan was also in the radar of in was also hot in
Yeah.
the, and he unfortunately his jet got hit and he had to eject.
So I'm going out of chronology and out of the book thing, but I want you to talk about a little bit about the thing you talk about is the sleep deprivation and the music torture, right? Because we've seen this in a lot of people who've seen movies like Zero Dark 30 or read about what the Americans did. It is somewhat similar, right? So and to get out information. And again, I'm not endorsing anything, I'm not talking about anything, I'm just stating the matter of fact that is stated in the book, and that's what the author is doing here as well. So can you just talk a little, not I mean, we don't need to elaborate, just talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the torture that was alleged to have taken place in Guantanamo Bay.
Mm,
It
mm,
I think there are indications that Abhinandan was also tortured in the same way.
mm,
The enhanced interrogation methods were used by the ISI, the
mhm,
dreaded ISI, and these people, when they took Abhinandan into custody from the army,
mm,
they tortured him black and blue.
mm.
It was
Horrible.
his bravery. It was his bravery that he could stand off the
Absolutely.
torture.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's quite horrible what happened. And then we move to the end of the what you talk about is basically you know from Katal Ki Raat to you have the missing prisoners of war. You also have, again, I'm not going to reveal much on the chapter. Do read that chapter. I just finished it a few hours before we recorded it, so it's a fascinating read. But ultimately, the epilogue of what India can take from this, and then we move on to discussing the legacy, and we'll end the discussion with talking about General Rawat. Um, what can India learn from this? What were our biggest lessons? And within, from the Air Force, for the army, as a veteran, what do you think?
I I feel that this is not only my feeling. Every veteran who has known about the airstrikes, or read my book,
Hmm.
because it has all the details. You might not find, nobody will find any of the details out in public domain. Most of the things are quite hidden. So there are a lot of discussions by some senior veterans who are asking questions that, should we wait 25 years to reveal, or to declassify the military history, or should it be returned then and there, as they do in the US, as I've done with this book.
Yeah.
So this kind of discussions are taking place amongst very senior veterans. Now let me come back to the book. That,
Mm.
see, India, if we perform with confidence, if we are being what we are, as they say in cricket, that if you play your natural game, then
Mm.
you are a winner. You are already a winner. If you consider playing, as Dhoni used to say, that if you consider playing the game ball by ball, then you are already a winner.
Mm.
You might lose some, you might win some, but you are a winner if you play to your strengths. And the strength, India has its strength, is India's biggest strength is its manpower.
Mm.
We might not be very advanced in comparison to technology, with say with in comparison technology with in comparison with China.
Mm.
But if we are India, and this is what makes us, this is what we are. And if we stick to what our strengths, then nobody can stop us in the world.
Fascinating, fascinating. I think you've raised some very crucial points, some very important points, and we just have to wait and see how this goes. But I think ultimately, at the heart of it all, this talks to people and what they might believe, what their sort of idea of India would be in this, and how what India to move forward to. We stand for we will not attack first, we will not be provoked, but if you touch us, we won't let go. Ultimately, that's what it is. So I applaud you and appreciate you for writing this book. I urge everyone to go read it and write to us what they feel about it. But the shadow of General Rawat looms large, not only along this book, it also looms large in the discussion we take. So I want to end this by talking about his legacy and the legacy he leaves, and what is the way forward from here.
He lives, General Rawat, or late General Rawat, leaves a huge void
Hmm.
for the military.
Mhm.
The military has always been thought like, we speak very less. We are not, very aggressive. The Indian Armed Forces, in particular, our generals also, they talk
Hmm.
very less. But General Rawat was an exception. Some people did not like his speaking out his mind, but that
Hmm.
is what information warfare is all about. You
Hmm.
want your top general to be aggressive. You want him to be on your face. He
Mhm.
the things that he talked about China, the things that he talked about the Chinese virus,
Correct.
and he was never somebody who just talked brashly. He was a very responsible speaker, but he always spoke his mind. And it doesn't happen often in
Hmm.
India, that you have some general who is so much outspoken and so much well received in the society. He was
Hmm.
loved by one and all, and it's a huge void that is there to feel. And let us pray to God that he he his
Yeah.
soul rests in peace.
Absolutely. Prayers for the departed souls of all the people, all the soldiers, and prayers for their families and what they're going through. We have a tradition of recommending things on the podcast, and I would absolutely recommend you guys read this book. Read about General Bipin Rawat. If you have any recommendations that you would like to give, please.
I think I have a very big recommendation. I think India, somebody should come and write a story about General Rawat, write a book on him. Let the entire armed forces get together. Let the government get together, and let us every Indian should know about the legacy of General Rawat. It's a huge legacy that he has left, and I think it's my request, not only recommendation, but a request to all fellow military writers. Actually, people are coming up, even requesting me to write about General Rawat. But let me see. I have
I
not
hope
much
you
access
do.
with. Yeah, I wish to write about him. Being a soldier,
Mhm.
nothing. It's a matter of. It would be a matter of great pride. Whoever will write about General Rawat, I don't. But not the journalist. Let some a soldier write about
You're a
the general.
soldier, right? Absolutely, absolutely. And for for the legacy he's developed as CDS, I hope that position is filled soon as well. I know those are big shoes to fill, but we have to ultimately move on, and no one knows about moving on and getting the job done more than a soldier. So listen to the soldiers; they'll give you the the right sort of perspective. But thank you, Manan Bhai. Again, veteran Manan Bhatt with the Indian Navy, author, columnist, and most importantly, veteran. Like I said, thank you for your service and thank you for joining us on Mind Podcast today. This is a fascinating discussion. I hope to have you on more. For such discussions, maybe we'll do one more soon in the next few months to come. But this was truly a great experience for me. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Adit Bhai. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, then please like, share, subscribe, guys. We'll be back soon with more next week. Until then, it's goodbye.